Now, in order to get a step-parent adoption in Alabama, you have to get consent from the biological mother, the biological father, and if the child is 14 or older, you also have to get their consent. There are some exceptions to this, but we're not necessarily going to go over those exceptions in this video. Now, there are two different ways to get consent, okay? The first one is actual consent, and the second is what's called by the statutes implied consent, okay? So what is actual consent? Well, actual consent is exactly what you think it is. It means both parties come into the law office, we draw up the necessary forms that consents, both parents consenting that this adoption goes through. So once that consent is given, the consent cannot be taken back unless it was done by fraud, mistake, or undue influence, or if the court rules that a revocation is in the best interests of a child. So the second way to do it is implied consent, okay? And implied consent is much harder to get and much harder to prove. And so whenever someone talks to me, I always will tell them, hey, look, can you get in touch with the other parent first to find out if they will agree? If they will agree, it will make this case go much quicker, save you money, save you time, save you stress. If they will just come in, sign it, that way we can get the process started and get done. But you know, a lot of times that doesn't happen, but normally I tell people, hey, it's worth a shot to find out. So if we can't get that done, the next way to do it is through implied consent, okay? So what is implied consent? So there's a statute that lays out what implied consent is, okay? And I'm not gonna go over every form of implied consent, but the two main forms are the abandonment and failing to comply with a putative father registry, okay? And in order to figure out which one that you will have to do in your step-parent adoption, we've got to figure out exactly the definition of what the father in this particular case would be, whether they are what's called a putative father or whether they would be called a adjudicated father or a presumed father, because each of them has different burdens for how we push through the adoption. So let's go through some of the definitions for the different types of fathers, and I'm going to read this because these are actually hard to memorize. Okay, so an acknowledged father is a man who has established a father-child relationship, okay? An adjudicated father, adjudicated legal father, is a man who has been adjudicated by a court to be the father of the child, okay? An alleged father is a man who alleges himself to be, or is alleged to be, the genetic father or a possible genetic father of a child, but the paternity has not been determined, okay? A presumed father is a man who is recognized as the father of a child until that status is rebutted or confirmed in a judicial proceeding. And we'll get back to that in just a second, or how you do a termination / adoption with a presumed father. And a putative father is the alleged or reputed father. So the standard to terminate a putative father is a lot lower than the standard for an adjudicated or presumed father, okay? So when we're going over your case, we've got to determine normally if this father is going to be considered a presumed father, okay? And the reason being is if they're a presumed father, then we're going to have to prove the abandonment clause, okay? If they're a putative father, then this, again, the standard is lower. We just have to prove that they did not comply with the putative father registry within 30 days after the child's birth. Boom, that's consent right there. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to presume that the mother and the father were never married, okay? If the mother and father were married, then things are a little bit different, but let's assume that they were never married, the difference in presumed and putative, right? So if the father took the child into his home or otherwise openly held out the child as his natural child or provided emotional and financial support for the child, then he is the presumed father of that child, okay? So the paternity of a child having a presumed, acknowledged, or adjudicated father may be disproved only by admissible results of a genetic testing excluding that man as the father of the child or identifying another man as the father of the child, okay? So really we got into the weeds there, but really it comes down to if they're a putative father, did they comply with the putative father statute? If not, boom, we've got consent, right? And how do they comply with that? You fill out the putative father registry either before the child is born or within 30 days after the child's born, okay? If they're a presumed father, then you've got to prove the abandonment. Again, there's other exceptions, but we're going to just presume that we're going to use the two most common, okay? And abandonment here is knowingly leaving the adoptee, the child, with others, so that would be, for instance, the mom, without provision for support, that means not paying any child support, and without communication or not otherwise maintaining a significant parental relationship with the child for a period of 6 months. So we've got to get to that 6-month mark. A lot of you will come see me, and the first question I'm going to ask is, when's the last time that the father has had a conversation with the child or visited with the child? And so the reason I'm doing that is we're trying to figure out where are we on consent? Do we have that 6-month consent mark there for abandonment? So once we have consent, where do we go from there? Normally at that point, we're going to file a motion for an interlocutory order. What is an interlocutory order? Okay, basically that is a temporary order by the probate court giving the step parent temporary custody over the child. Okay, so normally in a divorce action, you'll have like a pendant light hearing to determine temporary custody of the child. Here, it's just called an interlocutory order, and that would allow the step parent, pending the final hearing of the adoption, to have custody of the child along with their spouse. So what other steps are involved in a step-parent adoption? Okay, one that's required is for a step-parent adoption is you may have to get a DHR home study, okay? There's a way around that. If you've been living with the child for 1 year or more, then we can waive that requirement. And that's beneficial. It'll save you money from not having to pay DHR to come check out your house, to do the background check, and all, and just really streamlines the process. So what are the benefits of a step-parent adoption? Why would you decide to do a step-parent adoption? Okay, one is the obvious, is to say, hey, now I am the legal parent of that child. Okay, that allows you or allows the child to inherit from you just like you are the child's biological father, right? That is a benefit there. Okay, another benefit is just making it known to the world that you guys are a family, that we're putting pen to paper legally in the eyes of the government, that you are the father of this child, that you've already been doing that for a period of time, and now the government, the state, is acknowledging this is the father of the child, okay? And so when we create that new bond, it terminates the rights of the other parent. The previous parent's rights at that point would be terminated. And so, obviously a benefit of that is that later on down the road, if that parent gets off dope or starts doing good, at that point they can't just try to come in the child's life. At that point they have no relation to the child. They would have the same relation as me to your child if I started asking to be around your child, which is not going to be allowed by the state, okay? So there's also responsibilities involved with a step-parent adoption. Once you become stepdad, at that point, you've got the responsibilities of raising a child. And one of those things that is involved with that is in the future, hopefully this never happens, but if you guys divorce and you're not the one that has custody, then there is an obligation to pay child support, just like a father in any other situation would have. This is your child. And again, a lot of times we'll let the mother know when they're going through this is, look, when you were signing this consent to adoption. Understand that if you guys in the future were to divorce, again, I'm not encouraging, I hope that never happens, but if it does, you have to understand that the new father is going to be treated like the father in the divorce. Okay, so there's a possibility at that point, regardless of whether they're biological or not, that they get custody of your child, that they're given visitation to your child. And the people, when they're giving consent, I think it's important for them to know that. If you're wanting to get a step-parent adoption, please contact me. We'll set up a consultation so we can go over what steps you'll need to take to get this step-parent adoption done. You'll come in the office, or we can do Zoom, and we'll look at your previous papers and figure out what we need to do to make this happen for you.